The issue of gun control legislation has been hotly debated across the U.S. for centuries, since the drafting of the U.S. Constitution in 1787. The majority of this debate has taken place since the 1970s. The Federal Gun Control Act of 1968 expanded the limitations on gun possession, making it more difficult for a person to obtain a firearm. A 2010 survey estimates that between 40 and 45% of households contain at least one firearm. Those who advocate for an individual's right to obtain a handgun offer the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution as supporting evidence. The Second Amendment states that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Established in 1871, the National Rifle Association is the leading advocacy group for gun possession in the United States. Gun advocacy groups like the NRA believe guns are used more for self-protection than to commit dangerous acts or crimes. The NRA, who denied our request for an interview, gave us the following statement. For 130 years, the National Rifle Association of America has stood in opposition to all who step by step would reduce the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms to a privilege granted by those who govern. NRA continues to fight against those who would dictate that American citizens should seek police permission to exercise their constitutional rights. NRA believes that the Second Amendment speaks to far more than a right to enjoy firearms for hunting and target shooting, the phony sporting purposes notion to which so many cling. Such notions trivialize an essential freedom which NRA is honor-bound to defend, a constitutional safeguard as worthy of defense as freedom of speech.
We've talked about the truth now. Now let's talk about the justice part. You know, when the authorities can't protect you, they've got no business and no authority trying to deny you the right to protect yourself. It's...
However, there are also many advocacy groups for gun control. These groups like to point out that the Second Amendment also refers to the necessity of a militia for the security of a free state.
My view of the Second Amendment and what makes it so truly interesting is that it was placed in the Constitution in part as a marker of the possibility of what has to be admitted is the violent overthrow of an oppressive government. That, after all, is what we did in 1776, or what we thought we were doing in 1776. So when they talk about a militia, I think that some people had in mind the image of Minutemen in Concord and Lexington and other groups of citizens. They were not necessarily thinking of state National Guards and the like.
Gun advocacy groups believe that guns contribute more to gun violence than they help to prevent it. In 2008, a survey conducted estimated that 67% of all murders committed in the United States were committed with firearms. A leading anti-gun group, the Brady Campaign to Prevent Violence, who failed to respond to our interview request, features a continuously updating count of people shot in America.
I also believe that we have to do everything we can to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and gang members and people who have problems mentally.
Gun control legislation is not continuous across the United States. Since the Constitution does not explicitly designate the issue of gun control to the federal government, the 10th Amendment reserves the power to decide to the states. Therefore, each respective state gets to determine its own stand on the issue.
More gun control does not lower murder rates, it actually increases them. Look at this city, Washington, D.C., toughest gun control in the country.
Washington, D.C. is well known for its relatively strict gun control laws. Gun laws are a pressing issue in the D.C. area because D.C.'s action regarding the legality of owning weapons can often reflect the attitude of the national government towards the restriction of gun ownership. In 1976, one of the most strict gun laws in history was passed in the District of Columbia. The law went so far as to ban handguns completely. Beginning around 1986, 10 years after the handgun ban went into effect, the murder count in Washington, D.C. skyrocketed. Recently, after 32 years of its existence, the D.C. handgun ban was deemed unconstitutional in the 2008 Supreme Court case, District of Columbia v. Heller. The court sided with Dick Heller in a 5-4 decision that the Second Amendment protected America's right to own handguns. The federal ruling in this court case will likely set the precedent for the states, as all states must abide by federal law.
I really found Justice Scalia's opinion for the court to be wildly off kilter, inasmuch as, for a variety of reasons, he really chose to ignore what is most radical and I think historically true about the Second Amendment, which was the extent that it is designed to empower the people to overthrow a corrupt government. And instead, he turned it into an amendment that really is designed only to protect people against criminals who are trying to invade their home.
To ultimately resolve the dispute concerning gun possession in the United States, two determinations must be made. First, in accordance with the 10th Amendment, does the federal government have jurisdiction to make the final decision, or is that choice reserved to the states? Second, does the Second Amendment give the individuals the right to own personal firearms? The debate is ongoing and requires much interpretation of the Constitution to determine the answer.
Currently, gun control advocates and their elitist allies wish to subject the people to more government oppression of freedom by denying individuals the right to arm themselves.